So I would like to welcome you all to Transplant Talk Live, Arrow the Bone Marrow Transplant Foundation's webinar series. These webinars are an opportunity for us to delve deeper into a number of BMT, stem cell and CAR T related topics, with tonight's webinar focusing on CAR T therapy from both a patient and a carer's perspective. I'm Angela. I am the Patient Liaison and Communications Officer at Arrow, and I'm joining you today from the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung people in the Geelong region of Victoria. I have with me today our wonderful host, Yvonne Panek-Hudson, who is a clinical nurse practitioner in haematology at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre and Royal Melbourne Hospital in Melbourne. She's also the co-host and of our fabulous podcast, The Straight and Marrow. Yvonne is also one of the directors with Arrow, and she's joining us today from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in Naarm, Melbourne. Along with Yvonne, we are very fortunate to have two wonderful guests with us tonight. We have Chantelle Asciak. She is our very lovely patient panellist, and she is joining us tonight from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people also. And also we have Melissa Moon. She's our wonderful carer, and she's joining us from the traditional lands of the Quina people. So thank you, Melissa and Chantelle, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Shortly, I'm going to hand over to Yvonne, and she'll be facilitating the Q&A, which we will hold on completion of our panellists' presentations. So please, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, pop them in the Q&A section, and Yvonne will be sure to look through those. She'll be constantly checking what's happening, and we'll be able to try and get to those questions at the end of the presentations. We will ask you to keep in mind that this webinar is, while it is discussing lived experience, we're unable to answer any questions regarding your own health status, and we can only provide general advice throughout the webinar. So we kindly ask you to please contact your treating healthcare team if you do have any specific questions that may arise from tonight's webinar. So enjoy tonight's webinar with us all, and I'm going to throw over to Yvonne to take it from here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ange, and thanks to Mel and Chantelle. Really excited to hear what you've got to say and share with our wonderful community. There is nothing quite like hearing the lived experience from people who have lived and are also living through the experience of CAR T treatment. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Chantelle, who is our first presenter. And as Ange said, Chantelle is a young woman who has had a CAR T, has had CAR T treatment, and she's going to talk to us about her experience. Thanks, Chantelle.
Thank you. Just going to show you this. Hi, everyone. My name is Chantelle.
We can see that.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, my name is Chantelle. On September 15th, 2022, Lymphoma Awareness Day, I was diagnosed at 32 with a rare form of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, primary mediastinal subtype. For 7 months before, I was misdiagnosed with many chest infections. 2 weeks before I found out I had lymphoma, my upper body swelled up, my cough worsened, and I could no longer lie flat. Sorry, one thing. It felt like someone was suffocating me. A scan finally revealed a 7.3 by 12 centimetre tumour, pressing against my heart, pushing it further to the left of my body, sitting right on my main artery and restricting air to my brain. I was rushed to the Royal Melbourne Hospital on Friday. And by Sunday at 2 a.m., I was in the ICU, faced with the hardest decision of my life. If I wasn't intubated, I could die. But if I was intubated, I could still die due to certain risks. I called my bum knowing deep down what had to be done, and so I was intubated and started DART-AE-POC chemotherapy to see if it worked. After 7 rounds in March 2023, I heard the words, "You're not in remission." But we didn't expect you to still be here today. That was when I realised how serious my situation was. Despite some tumour shrinkage, it wasn't enough. I moved to salvage rice chemotherapy in the hopes of a stem cell transplant. But by April, my tumour remained too large and the transplant was off the table. My last hope was CAR T. As you can see in the scans, how it shrinks and then you can see it light up. And then shrinks again, and then over on this side on May 19th, it increased massively. Through my second round of rice, I lost my dog of 7 years, which was the hardest part of all of this. But in the moment, I had no time to grieve, not for me, not for my dog. When you're in survival mode, you just have to get yourself through each treatment, every appointment, and the constant disappointments. The only option was to keep moving forward. My grieving didn't come until after remission, a mix of happiness, sadness, and all of the what ifs. But through it all, I'm still here. Preparing for CAR T felt like I was gearing up for battle. I had to gain weight, prepare for a long hospital stay, and keep my brain active. In May 2023, I started Pembro immunotherapy to stabilize the tumour, and my T cells were retrieved. A surreal process made easier by an amazing nurse. My cells were literally going on a holiday before me. But by mid-May, my tumour had aggressively grown again. It grew to an SUV size of 15.6, a size of a nectarine. Before that, it was the size of an olive. My T cells arrived early, and after preconditioning chemo, May 26, 2023, day 0, I had my CAR T infusion. The infusion itself was smooth, aside from the awful taste, thank goodness for the lollies. Watching my cells arrive in a freezing contraption that reminded me of R2-D2 was strangely exciting. Then the real fight began. By day 3, I had the expected fever, and then immediately regretted it. My biggest struggles were critically low blood pressure, 12 emergency team visits, and neurotoxicity. I went from holding a conversation to suddenly forgetting my doctor's name, the Prime Minister, and how to write a simple sentence. I lost 2 entire days of memory that I'll never get back. After 15 days in hospital, I returned home, but life wasn't the same. I lost my independence, relied on my parents and friends, and felt exhausted. But I stayed as active as I could. At my day 30 scan, I was technically in remission, but couldn't be told officially. Then by 90-day scan, there was still a shadow where my tumour had been. To be sure that CAR T had worked, we needed to do a biopsy before confirming my remission status. On September 6, 2023, I became one of the first patients with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma to undergo microrobotic surgery, which is only done for lung surgeries. Not only did they remove everything that wasn't meant to be there, but on September 15th, 2023, exactly 1 year after my diagnosis, I was declared 100% in remission. Now, coming up to 2 years post-CAR T and still in remission, I look back and know that without this treatment, I wouldn't be here today. Without my head hematologist, who has been with me from the very beginning, all the different care teams, my family, friends, pets, and the incredible friendships I've made along the way, I wouldn't have made it through. And I want to say thank you. To future CAR T patients and carers, this journey is tough, unpredictable, and different for everyone. But if you're here considering it or supporting someone through it, know this: you're not alone, and this treatment is changing lives, including mine. Thanks.
Thanks, Chantelle. That was absolutely fantastic. And I'm looking forward to getting some questions from the participants in the audience. I'd like to welcome Mel, who is the partner and carer of Adam, to present to our audience. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you. Thank you, Chantelle. Just gonna. All right. Is that coming through okay? All right.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name's Melissa, and like Yvonne shared, my partner Adam very, very, very recently, in the last 2 months, underwent CAR T therapy at Peter Mac in Melbourne. So just a quick overview of his story is that he was diagnosed with stage 4 diffuse large B-cell lymphoma in March 2024. He had 6 rounds of R-CHOP that he only had a partial response to, and then he went on to have 32 rounds of radiation. And we found out in January of this year that had failed, and every ounce of progress that he had made during his R-CHOP just completely went away, and his tumor had grown back and it had spread. And within 5 days of finding that out, we were on a plane to Melbourne because we actually live in Adelaide, just to put a little bit of extra complication on top of this process. And so we were on a plane to Melbourne to meet with the incredible team at Peter Mac, and they collected his cells, and he received CAR T on February 10th. And we found out that on the 12th of March, he was told that he was in complete remission. His scans were clear, which was the first time we'd ever heard those words. It was a wonderful day, best day of our lives so far, for sure. And now he's actually back at Peter Mac and beginning a clinical trial just to hopefully ensure and secure some of those results that he had on the 12th. But still, overall, a whirlwind experience, like Chantelle said, a very difficult experience, but an experience that we're very thankful for. So I kind of put my talk into before, during, and after CAR T, just from my perspective as a caregiver, because I think one of the things that I'm finding the most difficult about this journey is that life goes on, and it feels like life should not go on. Everything should stop, and you should be able to pour all of your time and energy into either yourself or your loved one, whoever is going through it. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We have jobs. Adam and I have 2 children who are 12 and 10. And we have to take all of those things into consideration when you make a huge decision, like leaving your home for 6 weeks at least to go and receive a treatment. And yeah, of course, it seems like a no-brainer. It's what he needs, but there are a lot of logistics, unfortunately, that you always have to attend to. So in my situation, since we were relocating to Melbourne, there was a lot of coordinating that had to be done with flights and travel and accommodation. But I will say that the team at the Raw in Adelaide and also the team at Peter Mac were absolutely incredible helping us with that. They really took the lead and just kind of needed some confirmation, which was such a huge load off of our minds. And also all of those travel and accommodation was all covered in terms of finances. We didn't have to pay for those things, which was another huge blessing because Adam had to, we're both teachers. He had to leave his job just with all the uncertainty of not knowing how he would be feeling. And my school was luckily incredibly generous to give me 6 weeks off, even at the beginning of the school year. So very thankful for that. But it was nice not to have to worry about all of that. In the midst of the emotional kind of turmoil that you're going through, thinking about doing these things, I found it really helpful just to write everything down. Write down all of your questions before your appointments. Make sure to write down your responses. I just remember at the beginning of this, sometimes I would leave and I'd be like, wait, what did they say? And I would really want to remember, the exact wording of what we were told. So I found that to be really helpful. You're in a new space. If you're traveling, you're not in your own home. So I found it really helpful to pack items that will make your apartment feel more homey, like a favorite blanket. We brought pictures of the boys. They did not come with us. They stayed with Adam's parents in Adelaide so that they could stay in their school routine. And also, again, we did not know how Adam would be feeling, so we didn't know how much of that we wanted them to see. So we bought picture frames of the boys and our family, candles, things like that, just to make a foreign environment feel a little bit more like home. And those things can also, apart from candles, be taken to, the hospital as well, just to make it feel a little bit more comfortable. Pack a lot of comfortable clothes because you'll be spending a lot of time sitting, and just sitting, watching, observing, resting, things like that. Quiet activities. I love to color. That's a major de-stress activity for me. So I brought some coloring books and things like that. When Adam was feeling okay, we played some games, read some books and things like that. If you're traveling, I would say learn something that was helpful for us is kind of learning a bit about the area that we were in. I'd actually never been to Melbourne before. As you can probably tell, I'm from the US. So that was my first time to Melbourne. Not really the way I wanted to visit, but it is what it is. And we kind of looked into our area. We found like a favorite cafe that Adam is actually back in Melbourne right now, and he went there today. He was like very excited to go back and go to the cafe. We went there on all of our like special days, like the day he got out of the hospital was our 5-year anniversary, and we went there to celebrate. And it kind of, I don't know, we kind of got to know the staff there a little bit. It was nice, considering we didn't know anyone in Melbourne. A park that you hope to visit maybe once your loved one's out of the hospital or you are, it was nice to have things to look forward to. Even though you don't know what's going to happen, we just hope for the best, hope that when he gets out, he'll have the energy to do things together. And we planned for a visit from his kids and his parents. They came at the very end of our time there, which was really special. And the other thing that is so important to remember, you put so much energy into your loved one who's going through this. And I think it's so important to remember to grieve and breathe. And you have to do that. You are going through something. It's so incredibly painful to watch someone you love suffer. And that's something that you really do have to take the time to process. So I have done that in many different ways. Journaling, praying, all the things. I've tried many things, but really important. During CAR-T, I think one of the main roles that the doctors and nurses talk to me about is just being really observant, making sure that you are checking in on your person, and just anything you notice that is out of the ordinary, please let your doctors and nurses know. I just remember one time Adam was getting up to go to the toilet and he was really weak, and I was helping him stand up, and I could just feel his heart beating out of his chest. And no one had checked on him in a bit. There are normal times that they would check on him, but it'd just been a little while. And I had just been sitting next to him, so I hadn't noticed anything, and he hadn't said anything. And I was just like, oh, your heart's beating out of your chest. That's definitely not normal. Nurses came in, it wasn't normal. They did what they needed to do for him. Same, he had a tiny bit of neurotoxicity, and I was actually about to leave the hospital, and I was saying goodnight to him, and I realized he couldn't he couldn't say his words properly. And so immediately went to get the doctors. They were able to intervene right away. But I think they actually do really rely on you to notice those things. Because what was interesting is that even though he couldn't formulate his words, when they asked him the questions on the ICANS, he could answer them perfectly. So the ICANS test is not like a perfect test for to figure out if someone is going through neurotoxicity or not. Really long days in the hospital, take breaks, don't feel guilty for going to get a coffee or going on a little bit of a walk outside. Like, it's important for you to be well as you can be, so that you can support your person in the ways that they need. If you're at Peter Mac, they have many lovely cafes. So yeah, go get yourself some lunch. Like, it's okay. And I know in my case, like, Adam was like, I'm literally just sleeping. Like, please go do something. And he was fine with that. Take advantage of the services there. If you need to talk to someone, like, we were offered psych services there. I know there are caregiver support groups, family, friends. I did a lot of FaceTiming. Of course, my family lives overseas. So yeah, a lot of FaceTimes and things like that, just to kind of verbally process what was going on, if that's what you need. Adam and I have lived in many different places in the world, so our people are kind of scattered all over. So instead of me trying to communicate with every single person, I picked a family member to kind of be the point of contact, and I gave them the information, so I only had to say it once. I find it very difficult to talk about these things over and over and over again. And they were kind of responsible for sharing that with our friends and family. After CAR T, if your loved one is able, or you're able, just encourage you to move around as much as possible. We did lots of laps around the ward, and just, I think it's important to validate what your person is going through, and also encourage them as much as you possibly can. I am a very positive, very hopeful person. Adam is a realist, and he kind of rests in the negative sometimes. So I try to validate and encourage him as much as possible, and while still, like, being true to myself and how I want to approach the situation. And I think learning how your partner approaches this and is important. After CAR T, you continue doing the ICANS test at home once a day. And like I said, those tests aren't perfect. That's a direct quote from the nurses. I'm not saying that. And just remember to closely observe for anything unusual. You have a CAR T phone number that you can contact pretty much at any time to let them know if there's something unusual. You continue to check his temperature 3 times a day. And then I am in charge of administering the medication. I took that on as part of my caregiver role. We bought him one of those little, like, pill boxes, which he said he didn't want because it made him feel like an old man, but it has been very helpful. So we put, so I'm kind of in charge of that. Just allowing them to move at their own pace. And also sometimes I'm like, please don't, that's too much. Like, you just got out of the hospital. But he, I feel like he has a good sense of, like, what his body is feeling and what he's capable of. And so, yeah, I just try to support him and allow him to do things that are gonna make him feel good, because he hasn't felt good for a really long time. Encourage movement and fresh air as much as possible. We did a lot of walks once we got out of the hospital. Remain an active participant in doctor's appointments and medical conversations, just to make sure you know what's going on, you know how best to support them, and just so you can be like an ear and another voice, just to make sure all the information is being fed back to doctors and vice versa. masks. He wears a mask in all public places just because his blood counts are kind of all over the place. You know, hand sanitizer, clean living environment. Again, validate and encourage what they're feeling. I think what Chantelle said is really true. Like the real grieving and like reflecting on the process actually comes after you get good news. We had like a day of elation, and then the next day we were like, ugh, what have we been through? Like that was horrendous. Not the whole thing, not CAR T. Like just as everyone knows, like cancer is just, it's cruel, it's horrible. And yeah, we're still processing that. And like I said, you know, a couple weeks later, Adam got a call that they think he should be a part of something else. And we're thankful for the opportunity, but you just have to be prepared, you know, for all the things, because you never know. So yeah, that was my last step, to help your loved one to make decisions about next steps. So I hope that this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mel. So we've got some questions in the chat for both Chantelle and Mel. There's a lot of thanks to you both in the chat. So on behalf of the audience, I'd like to, and on behalf of Ange and I and Arrow, I'd like to say thank you. I want to begin with a question for you, Mel, because you mentioned that you and Adam have two young boys, 10 and 12.
Yeah.
How did you have the conversation with them about Adam's diagnosis and his various treatments, and just, you know, the enormity of going through CAR T? I mean, CAR T is such a complex treatment for most people to understand. How did you make it understandable for the boys?
Unfortunately, we've had to have a lot of really hard conversations with the boys, and I'll just talk about how we told them about CAR T. When we found out that Adam had relapsed, he had been feeling unwell for a little while. And I think the boys, you know, children are much more perceptive than we give them credit for. And they know their dad, who is a typically very fit, very active person. And they kind of had a sense that he wasn't feeling well. And so our kind of agreement is that we don't share until we have a plan, so that we can we can kind of gear the conversation towards what's going to happen and like the ways that it could help. And so once we had decided to go ahead with CAR T, and we had gotten a lot of the our questions answered, and we kind of knew what exactly was going to happen, we basically, I mean, there's no easy way to say it. Like, we just had to tell them, like, you know, the treatment that your dad had wasn't successful. He still needs more treatment, and the best treatment for him, like that the doctors feel is going, you know, to do the most for him, means that we have to go to Melbourne for 6 weeks. Something that we did do before that is that we had already planned with his parents that they were going to come and visit. So we were able to tell them that and say, we'll be there for the first 4 weeks. Then you're going to come and visit. We're going to talk, you know, every day, as long as your dad is well enough to do so, which they did. They FaceTime 3 times a day, every day that he was there. They did end up coming to visit, and it was hard. They were devastated. They just were. Like, there's no way. I wish I had like a magic way that you could talk to kids about this and make it easier for them. But it was just a difficult conversation. But I think focusing on the hope element, focusing even on, and you also have to know your kids. Our oldest is very pragmatic. He likes having a lot of information. And so giving as much information as you can while still, you know, being appropriate for his age. And yeah, just trying to, you know, trying to instill them with some hope for the future. I'd say but it's not, we probably didn't handle it perfectly. It's just one of those things.
I think there isn't a recipe, is there, for how to do this? And you just have to often just do what's right and, navigate your way through the process depending on what's going on on any given day.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Mel. Chantelle, there's obviously, you've discussed your treatment, the specific things that you went through during or before your CAR T treatment, during your CAR treatment. How are you feeling now? So one of the questions in the chat is about side effects. Someone's shared that they still have some side effects after their CAR T treatment. How are you feeling on any given day? What sorts of things are you doing, and what sorts of things do you find difficult to do at this stage, 2 years post CAR T?
Post CAR T, coming to 2 years, I think this year has been the year where I am feeling more like myself. I'm feeling a lot healthier than I did when I just went in remission, and then last year. Sadly, when you do have CAR T, it kind of removes all of the vaccinations you've had since you were a baby. So you're immunocompromised massively. And I think the worst for me was because when I went in remission, and it's been a good year and a bit for me going through everything I went through, I was so excited to get out there and enjoy my life because I sheltered myself that whole time so I wasn't getting sick. And you have the nurses, like my team at Peter Mac, and I remember it, my best friend came down and she had a notebook and wrote everything down, and they're like, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't eat like food if it was a day old, like all these things. So I was very protective of myself. So when having CAR T, and then I went through all those side effects during treatment in hospital and then coming out, the neurotoxicity did hit me a little bit. So I did have a lot of headaches straight after it. Even now, 2 years on, I still forget a lot. I used to remember a lot, and now I kind of like get hazy, or I have to actually write everything down for me to remember that I've got something booked in. Like I know a couple of weeks ago, I had it written down in my diary that I needed to speak on telehealth with my hematologist, and my day got to kind of it happened, and I totally forgot I had my appointment, even though I was looking forward to it. So you kind of just, kind of get a brain fog, and you tend to get that when you do chemo as well. But with CAR T, I feel like that's something that's kind of stuck with you for a bit. And then also would be my mental health. So I think a lot after the whole year, and as I was saying, like I had to keep myself going, that affected me a lot more after treatment than it did during treatment. So, I see my psychologist, and, you have little breakdown moments. But overall now, like after last year was a year where I caught COVID in the year I went in remission, and then that affected my lungs a lot, and I caught pneumonia and then pneumonitis and a few other different health issues last year because I wasn't 100%. And a lot of the time when you get sick, your vaccinations get pushed back. So I had to wait until I was 100% healthy again. And then, I think it took us a good year for me to receive all my vaccinations back. So this year, so far, touch wood, I've been a lot healthier, and I'm taking it step by step, day by day. I'm getting there. Just happy to be coming up to 2 years.
Yeah, congratulations. That's absolutely fantastic. And I just want to swing back to support. So what sorts of, and this, Mel, feel free to jump in and make this more of a conversation, but Chantelle, you mentioned having support for your mental health. Obviously, there's lots of support through the hospitals as well, social workers, psychologists, your nurses, your doctors, etc. What other resources have you accessed? You know, support groups or literature?
So I was connected to, after going through all of that, during my whole treatment, I had Leukemia Foundation. They kept on giving me a call and check-in and allowed me just to rant off about how I was feeling. And then I also, with Lymphoma Australia, they've got a CAR T group that you can join. I try and stay away from there's a worldwide CAR T group, because a lot of the Americans in that group, they can easily access CAR T and different forms of it, whereas Australia, you have to go through different criteria to be able to receive it. So I kind of stay away from the larger group and kind of focus only on what's happening in Australia. So that was one of my supports. And then I kind of created my own little group with other patients who've gone through CAR T, which actually supported me through my CAR T journey. So I kind of knew what was coming. But then when we compared notes on the symptoms I had to what they had, they were completely different. Yeah.
What about you and Adam, Mel?
I am going to be totally honest. It has been such an insane year, like with all of this stuff, that I feel like we haven't tapped in to resources like probably the way that we should. But I feel like the grind, just going from treatment to treatment and things like that has probably been at the top of our list. But we since he had CAR T, we've both been talking about the fact that we definitely need to like speak to someone. But a lot people have told like about Leukemia Foundation and things like that. Like all of those things have been presented to us and offered. I feel like just finding the mental energy to actually like reach out and access those things. We haven't necessarily had that, but it's on the to-do list.
And like with any support services, it's really important to access them when the time is right for you. And, you know, as Chantelle said before, it differs from person to person. And often when people are early on, they're receiving the support from their treating team. And so potentially there's nothing additional that you need at that stage. But later on, when you have less contact, you're coming in for fewer reviews, fewer blood tests. That's when you need something more community-based and less hospital-based. I really liked what you said about making sure that your information was relevant as well, Chantelle. I mean, there is, you know, it's an information superhighway out there, isn't it? And it can be incredibly overwhelming. You know, every country that has access to CAR T, and there are some questions around access to CAR T in Australia, and I'll touch on it briefly, but I would really like people to ask that question to their treating doctors, their treating team. But, you know, the access to CAR T is very different in the United States to Australia. I mean, we do have standard of care CAR T availability, so that's, but again, there is eligibility criteria for access through standard of care. There is access to CAR T therapy through clinical trials, and there is a question about multiple myeloma, and there is obviously access to CAR T for multiple myeloma that's already available in some countries and is rapidly becoming available in Australia. So I really urge you to have a conversation with your treating team if that's something that you would like more information about. There's a question about the Wellness Centre at Peter Mac. Did either of you use the Wellbeing Centre?
Not really, but I think because I was on the ward a lot and I wasn't allowed to leave the ward because you're immunocompromised and you don't know what is out there. So, but we did have a lot of people come through. I remember my first round of treatment, I had some helpers come through that were giving foot massages. So that was exciting. But then you do get a lot of other support come through and like keep you occupied. And I think I did receive like a bag of like what was it? A hand stitched like blankets to give me some comfort. And I think that's pretty much what I had. I already had everything I needed in regards to like, I was drawing a lot and writing, and a lot of the time I'll just listen to my music. So yeah, but they are really good at the wellness center there.
Kind of similar, since we were only there for CAR T and Adam was on the ward the whole time. Didn't get to use it, but I did mean to go to the care support group that was there. I kept seeing it, and then I just like lost track of the days when we were there, and I missed it. But also, when we went there for Adam's cell collection, he was feeling really unwell. He did take a great nap in the wellness center. They have like lots of nice chairs and quiet areas and things like that. And people came over to check on us, which was really kind. So it's a great, that was one of the things we said when we left. We're like, that's such a nice space, especially if you're spending a lot of time there.
Yeah, and look, that's the Wellbeing Centre is commonly used by people coming in for outpatient appointments and by carers because, as you both said, often patients are actually in hospital and they are asked to stay on the ward. But it is a great space for people, and there's lots of really good resources and support groups that are available to patients of Peter Mac. There was a question which I think might be for you, Chantelle. Hang on, maybe not. It was to Mel, excuse me. Firstly, thank you for your journey from a partner's carer perspective. The question is in relation to the CAR-T contact phone number you mentioned. Is that a national number or was it a Peter Mac specific number that you were referring to?
It was a Peter Mac specific number. Yeah, so it was for the nurses and hematologists on the CAR-T team.
Yeah. So I've got another question for you both. And Mel, you touched on this, how that you identified someone in your family or in your peer group who was responsible for taking questions from everybody else. And that's such a brilliant idea, as well as, you both mentioned bringing really personal things into hospital, making it really comfortable while you're there, creating an environment that's, that is more like your home. The suggestion of having someone else as a contact person is excellent. How did you, in amongst all of that, how did you manage other people's expectations for information, and also some of the questions that people ask and comments that they make that can be really quite confronting at times? Chantelle, did you want to go first? I noticed that that really rung a note for you.
I think for me, because when you lose full control of your life when you get diagnosed. And the only thing that I can kind of control was letting people know my story. So I'm going to get a bit touchy on it now. So when I did first get diagnosed, because I couldn't speak because I was intubated, to let everyone know what was going on, I quickly created a Facebook group with all my close friends and family, and to let them know that I'm okay, but this is what's happening, so they don't kind of freak out. Before that, I knew, because my mum was the first point of contact, to tell her through my GP that I've got lymphoma. And from that, she spoke to my close relatives, and then I called all my other close relatives, like my dad and my partner at the time, to let them know that this is what's happening. And then, it was all through Facebook. And then once I got out of hospital, I then started sharing openly on my Instagram. So that's how I kept everyone in the loop. With expectations, at the end of the day, I let everyone know that if they're not comfortable seeing me, share my story and give them a diary update through the stories, that they don't have to watch my stories. because it was purely there for me mainly, so I can remember what I was going through each day as my own diary. But yeah, other than that, a lot of my friends just kept in contact through our little group on Messenger, and that was, a mix of family and friends. So I can give them little updates here and there. But after that, everyone was just calling and messaging. But you do get really tired where you just don't have the energy to talk to anyone. I know a lot of the time during treatment, I just kind of shut off and just wanted to listen to music and not use my energy, because you have such little energy in the time when you are doing treatment. So, but yeah, I always kept a group chat open, and when I learnt new things, then I let everybody else know.
Yeah, quite similar. I also, the first part of Adam's journey, we just kind of kept it between our family and close friends. And I didn't put anything out there like too publicly, like on our actual Facebook. We just had, like a Facebook group, and I would keep people involved or informed that way. And when he was going through chemo and things like that, it wasn't like a day to day. So it was okay for me to update. It was like, okay, he had his first round of chemo. This is how it went, things like that. Once he needed CAR T and it had spread, I'm not going to lie, I was really scared. And so I did end up putting it out there because I just thought, I don't know what's going to happen. So like, I feel like everyone needs to know. So like, just in case like people aren't completely taken off guard. And so I did start posting about it on my Facebook, and that actually ended up being like really, for us, it was ended up being the right thing to do, because we realized, like I said, we've lived all over the world. I'm not from here. Most of my support system is not here. It's in many other places. And same for Adam, even though he is from Adelaide, since we've lived in overseas quite a bit, like our support systems are scattered. And it was actually just such a nice way to connect us to people from our past, and just to know that people were thinking about us and praying for us was really helpful. I never went into too much detail about like what exactly the therapy was. For my close friends and family, I sent them a TED Talk about CAR T, and I just said, if you want to know what's happening, I don't have the energy to explain it. You can watch this. And I just said, it's on the it's recommended by all of our doctors. We think it's the best thing for him. This is what we're doing. Please like pray for us, and just, for Adam. So that was kind of how I explained the situation. And I agree. I think just don't put pressure on yourself. Like, I agree. I found it so exhausting to talk to people on the phone while he was in hospital. People are like, and they have the best intentions, but like, how are you? I'm really bad. My partner's in the hospital and he's really sick. I'm really bad. I'm sorry. Like, and there's only so many times I felt like I could say that. So, and I think that's fine. And I think having boundaries, and just, my poor mom, of course, she wants to talk to me every day. Like, no, I can't. I'm sorry. I love you, but when I need to tell you something, like, I'll let you know. So I think boundaries are good.
Let's move on to practical advice. So, you gave some really great suggestions, as I've already mentioned, about bringing familiar things into hospital and finding your favourite cafe, particularly if you're not from Melbourne, and, starting to build some connections with local people. What about after CAR T therapy? So in terms of diet, so nutrition, physical activity, and even contemplating things like returning to work or study. Chantelle, did you want to talk about some of those things?
I think the first, after all the different treatments, you can't eat certain foods. And I remember through CAR T, like the last few days of my CAR T, I was on my Instagram and sushi just kept coming up, and I love Japanese food. And for a whole year, you're not allowed to eat raw fish. So for me, I was like, straight away, I asked my the head doctor that came through before I left, I'm like, can I eat sushi. Like, and he goes, yeah. He goes, that's only when you do like chemotherapy. And I was like, oh. So I called my mom straight away. I'm like, we need to eat sushi when I get out of here. So I think food wise, your taste buds completely change. And so I had to like relearn how to eat certain foods again. I think I was stuck for a good 6 months on that whole like you can't eat food like leftovers. So I'd try and not eat like make too much food because I love cooking. So I actually started doing Marley Spoon to help me because I still didn't have the energy to go out and I was too scared to go out into the supermarket. So I organized Marley Spoon. It was straightforward, easy to cook. And that helped me keep a good diet as well. So I wasn't overeating or undereating. There was times where I couldn't eat. So my dietitian at Peter Mac kept on giving me like supplement drinks. So they send you extra supplement drinks if you need to. I know, Peter Mac, my dietitian, organized some to be sent to me. So I was able to have that if I couldn't eat because I felt still very nauseous at times. But yeah, I then also got into walking every day. So I go see the sunrise every morning and get my coffee. And I kind of, when you're leaving hospital, you're so used to a structured like appointments and heading to Peter Mac. And that was like my safe haven. And then coming out of that, I felt like my anxiety peaked because I didn't have that routine anymore. So I needed to create my own routine at home. So I would, go for my walks every morning, get my coffee at the same spot. So I created a different type of lifestyle and routine to kind of match up to what I had at Peter Mac. And I think though, over last year, I think because I was in hospital still a lot last year, now coming to 2 years, and I rarely go into Peter Mac. A lot of it's all through telehealth. So for me, it's, now I'm slowly getting my feet. With work, I was working from home already, and during treatment I couldn't really work because I was so sick. So luckily I had a great support network during that. But now, I still I work from home, but I'm able to still work full-time hours and allow me to balance my life out. I think that's one thing I've learned through going through what I went through. Like, instead of being in that full-time job where I was like working every day and that was all I was doing, now I have that balance on like enjoying still being alive and being here, and picking up different hobbies that I wouldn't think I would pick up. Yeah. So I'm slowly doing things. I've got my bucket list that I wrote during treatments when I didn't think I was going to make it. So now I'm completing that bucket list.
That is fantastic. Thanks, Chantelle. Mel, have you got some things to add to that?
Sure. Adam's primary tumor was in his abdomen. So I think when it went away, he was like hungry for the first time in a really long time. So he was very excited to be eating. And nausea wasn't one of his main symptoms from the CAR T. I know, like we said, it's really, really different for everyone, but he hasn't struggled with that too much. So he was just very excited to feel like he could eat again without any pain. So we, have been, like, in the hospital, I know they were keeping him on they wanted him to be on a high protein diet and stuff because he did lose a bit of weight in the hospital and things like that. So I think we're trying to maintain that. He's a PE teacher, so he's very, well-versed in health and nutrition. But we, have just kind of we told the boys when we got back, like, we're all eating healthy now. We're committing to that as a family. So he's not working, so he can cook and do things like that while I'm at school. And he's quite active. He goes on walks every day. That's his main thing. I would say, like, again, kind of knowing your limits and what you're capable of. We have a spin bike, and the other day he got on the spin bike and he wasn't even on it that long. And I was like, I think you might need to stick to walking for a little bit. Like, I'm glad you feel good, but take it easy. Like, this is, you know, you've been through a lot. And then, in terms of going back to work, like I said, he's a teacher, so just because of like worried about him getting sick and things like that. He does teach high school, so it's like a little bit better. I'm with the little ones, but he's not super keen. I'm not super keen on him going back to work quite yet. So I think we just have to ease into it. But he would like to. In terms of energy, he feels like he'd be able to do that.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, that comes to the end of our Q&A session and the end of the wonderful presentations. I would like to thank Mel and Chantelle for a wonderful conversation, and it really has been a conversation. I've really enjoyed that, and I'm sure our audience have enjoyed it too. There's lots of thanks in the chat, and I'm going to hand back over to Ange. Thanks, Ange.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was absolutely fantastic, ladies. We are so grateful to have you on board. You're both so inspiring, and you've got amazing stories to tell, and I'm sure our audience would have just been thrilled to hear everything. You've been through a lot, and we're really grateful for you being so raw and open with us tonight. And we wish you both all the best from here on in, of course. I'll just let you all know that the recording of our webinar will be available soon, so keep your eye out for that. And just at the end of this webinar, we will have a short survey. It is completely anonymous, so please answer as truthfully as you can. And we do value everybody's feedback and want to make this webinar as great as we possibly can. So your feedback is really important to us all. We also would like to let you know that we at Arrow are here to support all our bone marrow transplant, stem cell and CAR T patients and their carers. So please, if any of you that are listening are looking for some further support, we would love to support you. Reach out to your treating healthcare teams, reach out to your social worker, and you can always contact us at Arrow. Jump onto our website, which is www.arrow.org.au, and you'll find lots of links there. So we look forward to helping you if the time comes. A reminder that we will also be hosting our 4th webinar of this CAR T series on Tuesday, the 29th of April. So keep your eyes peeled for that next one. And until then, take care, everybody, and thank you all for coming along.